Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark along with you here on your Thursday. Appreciate Jay Swoda hanging out with us there from Gamecock Baseball. Best selected team tonight as they take on the College of Charleston out there in Charleston tonight to wrap up what's happening with fall ball. But we're, of course, turning our attention to this weekend and South Carolina taking on the Vanderbilt Commodores. So we got some sound coordinators, which we'll get to a little bit here as the hour rolls along. But some interesting things on the injury report last night. We'll start off with Vanderbilt, who for the first time this year featured Diego Pavia. Listed as probable. He'll play on Saturday, but
he's playing,
but he's gotten banged up as the season's gone along. What percentage he's at, we don't know going into this weekend, but I think about that as being a pretty big key, that if you can rattle him with a few hard hits, maybe early in the game, legally, of course, not targeting, that get him off his game a little bit, and that can help you out on Saturday.
Well, and probable means officially 75% chance that he is playing. I would put it.
He's playing.
I would put it like 99% chance that he's playing. But I have, I've talked to some people who basically have been like, watch the Vandy team a little bit now compared to maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago. They have played a bunch of games in a row at this point. And, we talked quite a bit about how fresh South Carolina looked last week coming off of their second bye week. And now Vandy's in this position where, you just get banged up. Like, it just happens. Like, you're going to have, like, the bumps and bruises start to stack a little bit. And I don't think it's necessarily a big deal that he's on this injury report, but I do think it's one of those things that could play a factor in this game when you consider how fast and athletic this South Carolina front is. Like, if you're Diego Pavia, but you're a half step slower than what you're used to being, and you have Dylan Stewart, you have D. Knight, you have whoever bearing down on you, I think that could be a factor.
So, I agree with you. It's 99. I would say 99.9% that he plays. But the percentage that he's at, what is that? Is it 95%? Is it 90? Is it 97? I mean, I was watching, and look, I knew Diego Pavia was a playmaker. I've seen enough this season, but by yesterday, I had gotten through watching more of their last two games, Auburn and Texas. And, man, it just hammered home. Like, he is the straw that stirs the drink. Like, he makes things go. I think they would be, and no disrespect, I think they'd be quite average without Diego Pavia. I mean, there was a play against Texas. Texas had Quinn Ewers threw a ball, got tipped, and got picked, I think on their first possession. And so Vandy gets the ball in prime territory. There was a play where almost any other quarterback is sacked. And he scored a touchdown, Like, he got away from it barely, and then he scrambles and jumps from, like, the 5-yard line and hits the pylon. And to your point, Wes, if he's even a half step slow, does Dylan Stewart run him down? Probably so. So I think it's something to watch for. If you watch Diego Pavia on Saturday afternoon and he's got just a little bit of a gimp, little bit of a limp, that's going to play a factor.
Well, and these guys can chase you down regardless.
Full strength.
So
yeah.
Here's the thing about Diego Pavia that stands out to me. He's only thrown 3 interceptions. But you watch him play, and you're like, this guy's a gunslinger. Like, this guy escapes pressure, just flips the ball out, and drops it into a bucket on the run while getting hit. Lots of times, guys, against his body, so rolling left, but throwing as a righty, obviously. And here's my question. So he has walked the razor-thin line so far for much of this season in that he's a gunslinger, but he is not throwing as many interceptions as you would think based on his style of play. So is this one of those things where that catches up to him one day or not?
Yeah, no, absolutely it can. And I think it's interesting to look as well when you have, the Vanderbilt schedule. Their first bye week was the week before they played Alabama. They've played every single week since. Their next bye week is not until after this weekend. And when we look at their offensive numbers, they've actually kind of started trending down in the game since, Ball State notwithstanding. Of course, that's a Group 5 team, but they've steadily gotten less on offense. 288 yards against Kentucky, 269 against Texas. That is the number 5 team. And then 227 last week, which was by far their worst offensive performance of the year. Defense really helped them out in that win against Auburn. So you can see not just with Diego Pavia, but the entire offense as a whole starting to kind of come back down to earth a little bit, which again could benefit South Carolina on Saturday.
How much of that is the offense, and this will be a little bit of a devil's advocate, Tyler, to what you're saying. How much of that, legitimate question, is the offense kind of, I don't know if regressing is the right word, but coming back to the mean a little bit, taking a step back versus just, Texas, by any metric, is one of the best defenses in the country. We were going over it, I think, yesterday, looking at PFF and the grades. Texas is in the top near South Carolina or ahead of them in several categories, right? So they're a really good, really talented defense. Vandy scores 24. That's nothing to sneeze at, right? Now, 17 against Auburn, but Auburn's offense at this point is kind of inept. Vanderbilt's defense played, as you said, Tyler, a lot better in that game. Look, the thing you do know, and Auburn's been pretty good on defense this year. They really have, despite their offense not helping them out much. This is going to be their third straight test, and so you kind of look at it and go, if your Vandy is scoring 17 points, 24 points, is that going to do it? You also know if you're South Carolina, yeah, that's what they've done the past couple weeks, but you still have to play really well against these guys. You still have to play really well against Pavia because he's a big play waiting to happen. He can beat you so many different ways. First of all, their offense presents a huge problem with just how they administer the offense. They're out there running pistol. They've got the diamond, like the inverted wishbone going. They've got people motioning before the snap, after the snap. Really hard to kind of count players, as you would say, defensively and account for where they are. He can run the ball on design runs. They'll take shots. He's really good throwing the ball downfield, even on early downs. And as Wes pointed out, when a play breaks down, he'll throw on the run and is extremely accurate. So, I look at the past couple weeks and say, hey, they've played good defenses. They've still made some things happen, and I think they're still a dangerous offensive team, mainly because of him.
How has he managed to be that style of player? And so you dive into PFF, and they credit him with only 3 turnover-worthy plays this season.
Yeah, that's insane.
Which my thought was, all right, as sort of dynamic as this guy, like that, there's always a give and take, and we've talked about this with, in regards to Lenoris. If you're going to get the big plays off of that, the scrambling, the extending, all those things, you're going to have to live at times with some turnovers. And so my assumption was, okay, he's thrown 3 interceptions. Has there been some turnover luck in his favor this season? Is it something that could revert back to the mean? And at least according to the guy grading this for PFF, that's not the case. And the 3 number is incredible. It's even more impressive when you dive into that as a percentage of his throws. 1.1% turnover-worthy play percentage. Quinn Ewers, who I'm a big fan of, 4.7%. Like, think of the difference. Carson Beck, we've talked about some of his issues, and this is just to give fans a little bit of context. Because that number, some of you are like, what does that number even mean? What's good? What's bad? Carson Beck, 4.2%. So of all of his throws, those are the ones not that necessarily go for turnovers. It doesn't, that number doesn't care if it went for a turnover or not. It's more like, should it have been a turnover? Could it have been a turnover? Carson Beck, 4.2. Lenora Sellers, 4.1. So that just gives you an idea. Garrett Nussmeier, 2.7. And typically, that number can get too low. And what I mean by that is maybe you're a quarterback who does not actually try to throw the football down the field. Maybe you're, our guy Clark Brooks calls him a check down Charlie. You just drop the ball off. All your throws are screens or dump offs, and there's no actual danger to your throws, but you're not really putting much pressure on the defense either. And that's clearly not the case with Diego Pavia. Like, this guy is going to make plays for you as well. So I don't know how he does it, but it's impressive. And I will still be curious. All of that being said, this South Carolina defensive front is so disruptive, so havoc-causing. Can they flip that on its head a little bit? We saw Texas put him in some situations to turn the football over with their front.
Well, and I wonder as well, the forecast is calling for rain on Saturday. Not like super heavy rain, but nonetheless, probably going to be dealing with some wet footballs. And you have two quarterbacks that neither one of them is elite at throwing the football. So the run game is going to become even more important, especially we talk about what these two quarterbacks are able to do. And again, when you go back and watch what Pavia has done this entire season, he's kind of done what we saw Sellers do last week against A&M, where if you have both these guys playing at that high level, it's really going to come down to which quarterback's better on Saturday, possibly.
Yeah, I think which quarterback's better, but, also, I'm going to annoy people with how much I talk about this the whole rest of the year, but just turnovers in general, right? And when South Carolina has struggled with that, a lot of times that has been at the quarterback position. It's not just Sellers. Sometimes it's his ball security. Sometimes it's he's not getting the blocking he needs, whatever it may be. And we saw last week, Rocket Sanders had a turnover, big turnover, on a play where Carolina's driving into A&M territory, and that kind of changed the complexion of the game and prevented it from being a potential early runaway to it turned into a ball game, right? And Carolina was eventually, fortunately for them, able to run away with it. So I go back to turnovers just generally, whether that's Pavia, Sellers. Look at the what has happened in the games throughout the season for South Carolina. When they've struggled with turnovers, they've lost. When they've taken care of the ball, they have won. And you can draw, except for the Akron game, because South Carolina was just far superior as a football team. That was an even margin. The Gamecocks, when they're taking care of the ball, are extremely hard to beat. Now, they played some offenses, namely Kentucky and Oklahoma, who have not been very good and were able to create some decimating turnovers for those teams. They scored on defense in both of those games, as we remember, multiple times against Oklahoma. Vandy, on the other hand, they do have a pretty solid offense. They can run the ball effectively, and they have taken care of it very well. So if you're South Carolina, I think you're going into this with the same formula. Hey, we got to get some turnovers. We got to make sure we take care of it ourselves. You could probably win if it's even. It's going to be tougher to win if it's not. So can you, like Wes said, can you kind of kick down that door of, turning some of those plays where Pavia – the few plays that he makes that are on the line, that are close, can you put just a bit more pressure and force him into a mistake or two?
Game within the game, can you bat a couple of passes down too? Because he has not had the turnover-worthy plays, but he has had the fourth most batted passes this season among SEC quarterbacks. So not the biggest guy in the world, not the guy that's going to sit there and throw over top of a defense. And so could be something to keep an eye on. If you don't get home, can you at least bat the ball down and keep him from hitting one of those big plays?
We'll get more insight into Vandy when we talk to Chris Lee from BandySports.com coming up at 11:30. But up next, the University of Florida has made a decision on head coach Billy Napier. We'll tell you what that is coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyrod West Mitchell and Chris Clark along with you on your Thursday here on the game. We'll talk more Vandy coming up in a couple of minutes with Chris Lee of VandySports.com. But Florida has officially announced Billy Napier's coming back with a statement about, 20 minutes ago from AD Scott Strickland.
So this is not a report, Florida planning to. This is a.
It's a official statement from Scott Strickland.
Oh, with the official graphic.
It's real.
Ooh.
Well, I think I need to go back before I speak, actually, and read this thing. The story from our guys over at Gators Online.
Chris is about to, actually, yes.
Well, I just have a question. The story says, Gators Online story says, Billy Napier will be the Florida Gators football coach in 2025, Scott Strickland announced. But I'm looking at the, they put this out in the form of like a graphic. And I'm looking at it, and initially I didn't see it actually say 2025.
Well, it doesn't.
Am I wrong?
But here's the thing. We're in the final month of the year. They're about to go through this murderer's row. They started with Georgia last week, got Texas this week, of games that we assume Florida's going to lose most of, with the exception being the Florida State game. So it's almost like they're getting ahead of it. And when you say we'll continue as head football coach, I mean, that says 25 without him actually saying 25, right?
That was what I took away, but at the same time, it doesn't say Billy Napier will be back next season. It's like we're not firing him today. Right now. Am I totally off? Am I thinking that there's a
you think
an out here?
They left themselves a little.
Well, Scott Strickland has been on the hot seat, the AD at Florida.
Yeah.
Some people were saying before the season, if Napier doesn't work out, he might be.
When did Strickland get there? It was after the Meyer years, right? He's a recent guy.
Yeah, because he brought over Dan Mullen.
That's right. It was Foley that was there before Strickland. Yeah,
Foley hired Jim McElwain.
Yeah. And, okay. So, the Mullen thing and now this. So, the Heat's certainly turning up on him a little bit. But, I mean, I guess there's still an out there to say, okay, assuming they lose to Texas, LSU, and Ole Miss by significant margins, that, prior to Thanksgiving, they say, well, we've reevaluated and we decided it's not in the best interest to continue on with Billy Napier. I guess that could happen, but it's weird timing to say it now if you
I agree.
Still are thinking that could happen, I guess.
Yeah, why wouldn't you just say in 2025?
See, I've got you thinking now.
Let's play that seated out.
What is, if you zoom in, the words Lane Kiffin is spelled out in capital letters, and no, I'm just kidding. But
every capitalized letter spells out Lane, come home or something.
Code. The picture that they've got in the background, Lane Kiffin's on the sideline, something like that,
smiling at the camera.
So here's the funny thing. Like I said, the end of this daunting slate is them playing Ole Miss at home, and let's say again they lose Texas, lose to LSU, and Ole Miss runs over them. The amount of conspiracies over, look at the way Lane Kiffin glanced over at Strickland on the sidelines, or his body language here, he's definitely coming to Florida. I'm already seeing that happening here in 3 weeks, right?
Well, and I think there's a point here to what y'all said about Strickland, and this is just, at this point, I think just fan fodder, but the thought of, if there is pressure on Strickland, but there's definitely fan pressure on Strickland, if that extends to kind of the administration side, do you want to be hiring an AD and a football coach at the same time?
No.
Or even if you think you have a problem at the football coach position, if you feel like you have a greater problem above him, you're better off hiring a new AD and then letting it be that guy's hire, as opposed to saying, we're going to make a move at football coach and then hire somebody new, and then, oh, by the way, we fired our AD. So if you're coming in as a new AD, you have a coach that was just hired, but you didn't hire him.
So they essentially, Strickland knows he's tied to Napier, and if Napier's going to go, Strickland's probably going to go before that, is what you're saying.
I mean, I'm speculating, but yes, that's what I'm saying.
Gotcha.
Right? Like how you can't do both at the same time.
I will point out, and Nicole Arbaugh is one of the first ones to report on this. She mentions afterwards that Napier's buyout is currently $26 million. She says schools like Florida are going to be paying around $20 million annually to athletics directly, with revenue sharing starting next year, impacting financial decisions like this.
Yes. Well, and that goes back to, this morning I was trying to work a little bit on finding out a little bit more about the stadium project at USC, right? So you got the stadium, you got the premium seating, you have the RFP, the request for proposal for development companies to come in and develop, the retail, all that space around the stadium that we all know about. And that's one reason why so many people are excited about that, because athletic departments are all, even the ones that have lots of money, they're all looking around saying, we have got to find a way to raise revenue, right? You have scholarship amounts, changing at schools. You have, or the possibility of it. You have revenue share. Things are just more expensive, right? I mean, there's so much going on with college athletics to where, it's rare that a school can fire Jimbo Fisher and pay him, what did he get, $75 million? Like, Florida doesn't want to have to do that, but you're just in such a hard spot nowadays. And I think one of the questions people have had in the revenue sharing era, will coaches' salaries, will they stagnate eventually? And I guess we don't have the answer to that, but so far they haven't, right? I mean, there's still talk about coaches being on the hot seat. It seems like schools are still very willing to fire coaches, but with Napier, is that factoring in somewhat? With revenue sharing maybe around the corner, it does seem like it's at least a consideration. If it's a $10 million buyout, they might be willing to, because you got to consider,
sure,
you got to pay that buyout. You also probably got to buy out your new coach.
Yeah.
Because your new coach is going to be a Jimmy Sexton client.
It's got to buy out all the assistants currently on your staff, too.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just firing the coach. It's hiring a new staff and paying those buyout monies a lot of times.
I know we got to go to Chris Lee, but do we know what it drops to?
It's a good question.
After this season?
Mm-mm.
Like, if it drops off significantly, then it's like, all right, let's wait. If it doesn't even drop off significantly, then maybe you're just saying, all right, we can't really afford this, but can we afford to just wait out the buyout?
I've also seen some reporting. I think Pete Nakos wrote a piece just on offseason, and a lot of it was like, hey, this guy's buyout's this amount, but it's only this amount lump sum and then payouts over the next X months. So that's more manageable than here's $20 million in a check in 90 days. And that does make a difference. That's what ADs are having to think about right now.
Talk more Vanderbilt with Chris Lee coming up next from VandySports.com. Reminder, coming tonight, 6 o'clock, Carolina Calls with Coach Beamer and Todd Ellis right here on the game in Columbia and Myrtle Beach. They preview the matchup against Vandy coming up this Saturday. It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Thursday here in the game.
All right, y'all, almost lunchtime. Hit up our friends over at Firehouse Subs. That's firehousesubs.com. Or the easiest way to do it, download the Firehouse Subs app. Hopefully all of you already have. Let me tell you about the Thanksgiving turkey sub. It says new here, but if you were around last year, you already got a preview of it because this was a test market for the Thanksgiving turkey sub. It is back and nationwide now, featuring carved turkey breast slices, dressing, cranberry sauce, and mayo served hot, all, of course, on a toasted sub roll. Guests can enjoy all the flavors of Thanksgiving all month long Again, order ahead with the Rapid Rescue to go. And, man, this thing is up there on the power rankings, and you can only get it for a limited time. So if you're wanting to try it, if you're already in that Thanksgiving mood, go ahead, head on over to firehousesubs.com or go ahead and pull up your Firehouse Subs app and order the Thanksgiving turkey sub right now.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, and Chris Clark along with you here on your Thursday. Looking ahead to the Gamecocks and the Commodores coming up Saturday afternoon at 4:15, which you can listen to right here on the game. Talking on the Love Chevrolet phone lines now with us about Vanderbilt. Got Chris Lee from VandySports.com. Chris, first of all, appreciate your time. Once again, spoke to you a few weeks ago. We started off the show talking about Diego Pavia popping up on the injury report. Is listed as probable, which means he's definitely going to play on Saturday, but banged up nonetheless. What can you tell us about what Pavia has been dealing with and what percentage he might be at going into Saturday?
Well, look, one of our writers was at the Georgia State game. Gosh, that's been the third game of the year, and was watching warm-up, said, hey, man, he's limping coming out here. So Diego Pavia has been playing banged up for a long, long time. Now, look, I'm going to guess that the severity of that has wavered week to week because you've seen some games where he's made some big plays. And I remember the Texas game that had a 3rd and 12 from the 18 or whatever, and he gets outside and he wins a foot race to the end zone. And so you've seen some times since then where he was good and looked effective, but then you saw some times like Saturday where he just didn't have any burst against Auburn, and it really hurt what they wanted to do. So I think this kid's been playing banged up since week one. Some weeks it didn't look like it. Some weeks it did. And what we're going to get Saturday, I don't know. I mean, I think if you're Vanderbilt, if you could flip that bye week from next week to this week, you'd love to take that, but that's not the choice they have. And so I think it's anybody's guess what we'll see Saturday. But based what I saw off the Auburn game, I think I've got some concerns there.
Hey, Chris, it's Wes. Appreciate you taking the time today, man. And I'm curious, coming into this season, were there some signs that you saw that this turnaround could be about to take place, or did it kind of hit everyone there locally as surprisingly as maybe everybody outside of Nashville?
Well, we went to fall camp, and the offense was just dreadful for so much of it. And we're, I think, maybe the only beat in the SEC that gets access to fall camp. And so we got to see all of it. And some days we would just look each other and go, I don't know how they're going to move the ball. And then the season started, and they're, perplexing everybody. And now, in our take leaving camp was, we thought the defense had a chance to be maybe better than people thought under Clark Lee. So, no, I didn't see this coming, but you always knew with Jerry Kill and Tim Beck. You saw what they did at Auburn last year. Jerry Kill is a tremendous football coach. So you always thought there's a chance. Is their talent on offense going to allow it? I don't know. Now we've reached a point in the season where I think both those things are kind of true. They've had a really good offensive year. Maybe what they're doing is starting to get taken away a little bit, but the defense suddenly has played really well. The defense is winning them games right now. Clark Lee is very quietly, in serving as his own defensive coordinator, turned around that side of the ball. And they do some things that Carolina can, have been problematic for Carolina. They do force some turnovers from time to time. So it's been a weird year. It hasn't played out exactly like I thought it would. But it's been interesting, and right now I think they're leaning more on the defense than they are the offense.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go next, Chris, and asking about the defense. Every week I put together a star power comparison. Basically, where does South Carolina's starters, like how are they ranked, right, out of high school, junior college, the portal, and then their opponent? And, we know that Vandy brought in, 24 transfers this offseason. They've certainly improved the talent of their roster, but they still have, I think 2 starters, that are 4 stars.
Yeah.
But every single week, they look like they belong. I mean, they belong with Texas, who's one of the most star-laden teams in the country. So when you're looking at the defense specifically, is it just that they're well-coached and experienced? Are they more talented than we think? What is it?
I think it's a lot of things. I think that on the back end, they've got some pretty good safety play. You saw DeRicky Wright and C.J. Taylor both get named as some third-team All-SEC type teams, and he's not even the best one they got. The best player on their defense is a kid right now named Brandon Fontenette, who transferred from TCU, where he was just kind of a piece last year. They recruited him out of high school. He's been a stud for Vanderbilt. They've got Langston Patterson at linebacker, who was supposed to be one of the best linebackers in the league come into the year. He's been kind of quiet. He's been banged up some, has missed some games, missed the Kentucky game. And I think up front, they don't have anybody that you would just circle as a star, but they've got, 8, 9, 10, 11 guys that they can rotate, and they're getting it done that way. But I think the big thing has been coaching. Last year, the year before, you would watch them, and they weren't the fastest defense, but also they didn't take good pursuit angles. It felt like teams would get a guy in space and there was nobody around with an angle to make a tackle. This year, I think sideline to sideline, they're much better in pursuit, much better in discipline and spacing, and I think that's what's made them better, the combination of they got a little more talent through the portal, and I think Clark Lee has coached them miles better than Nick Howell, who they fired in the offseason as their coordinator, did.
And talking to Chris Lee from VandySports.com, you mentioned directly right at free safety, and Coach Beamer alluded to him earlier on this week as he's going to present a challenge with his size being at 6'4" and 217, which is large for somebody at that spot, particularly when it comes to run defense. What challenges have you seen him present to opponents this year so far?
Well, he's big and he's athletic. He's a guy that a lot of people have felt probably should have been a linebacker more than he should have been a safety. And he was the guy. I mean, he got singled out so many times by fans as a guy that missed a coverage or just wasn't fast enough. This may be a case where the scheme has helped them because you don't hear him getting called out as much. It seems like he's played better. Now, health has been a little bit of a question. He seemed like a guy who, like, is down about every other game and comes out, but usually comes back the next week. Did come out of the Auburn game last week before coming back, so I don't know if health is an issue there, but I feel like maybe between the help and the system, he's had a better year.
Chris, let's talk a little bit more about Diego Pavia. And I've been amazed at the ability to walk the line between being this just playmaking guy that can scramble around, put the ball in some tight windows, extend plays to the left or the right, throw against his body. But then also you look at some of the PFF stuff, you look at his interception numbers. He's not turned the ball over and hasn't even really put the ball in danger in the passing game. How has he been able to be, you get to watch him every week, how has he been able to be so dynamic in kind of making those plays but not falling into the trap you see of a lot of those dynamic guys where he's not, it doesn't appear he's putting the ball in danger. Is that the case watching him every week?
That's absolutely the case. Look, he is not the biggest guy, not the fastest guy. As somebody tweeted us out, and I thought it was perfect, he is like just faster than whoever's chasing him, although I think we're getting diminishing returns on that with the injury. But I think the thing that stands out to me, he may be the smartest football player I have ever covered. Like, he will make these throws that are sometimes high degree of difficulty, but nobody's going to catch it other than his receiver, and if he doesn't catch it, it's going out of bounds. His ability to make that kind of throw game after game after game has been amazing. He rarely throws a bad ball. He threw in a little bit of a bad habit or fell into a little bit of a bad habit against Texas where they fell behind. I think he was trying to make some plays. The pass rush was getting after him, didn't have a lot of time. I think it was like either I make this throw and it may not go well, but if I can't come up with some miracle, we're not going to win the game. So there's been elements of that. But it was just in really that one small spot. He almost never throws an interceptable ball, at least so far this season. And his decision-making on just for the moment, okay, I've got to make a decision in a split second. Am I going to keep it? Am I going to pass it? It's amazing. He will do things sometimes that you're just not expecting to see him do. Does he have some athleticism? Yes. Does he have touch on the ball? Yes. But it is what he does in just that moment of decision where he's got 3 or 4 options. His ability to make the right call time after time after time is like few players that I've ever seen.
Chris, last one for you here. Got right about 60 seconds. These are two pretty similar teams coming in. What's the biggest key going to be for Vanderbilt on Saturday?
Well, I think it's Pavia's health. I'm concerned about that. You know, Vanderbilt does do some things that can give Carolina problems. Again, they've turned it over 5 times all year. I don't know what they are in turnover margin right now, but I think it's a top 20 number in the country. Carolina's had problems with that, with fumbles, with picks and things like that. So I think that's a place where the advantage tilts for Vanderbilt potentially. But I am worried about Pavia, especially because Carolina's defense is so good at every level. The guy that I saw last week was not the guy that's been winning them games, just because I don't think his health allowed it enough. So I think the key is, did he get well and energized in practice this week where they were going to try to keep him manage his load a little bit more? And I think that's probably the key. If he looks better, I think they've got more of a shot. If he doesn't, I think I'd have to lean heavily towards Carolina.
He's Chris Lee from VandySports.com. Appreciate your time once again, and excited to see what happens Saturday in Nashville.
Hey, thanks, guys.
Absolutely. We'll come back, wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Hear what Clark Lee has to say about this losing streak that Vanderbilt's been on against the Gamecocks. That's up next here on your Thursday on the Game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris along with you here on your Thursday. Carolina looks to extend its winning streak against Vanderbilt, which dates all the way back to 2009. Quickly, from earlier on this week, cut number 25 from yesterday here, Dave. This is Clark Lee talking about that losing streak and if he pays it any mind going into this weekend.
Sincerely, it doesn't occupy any part of my mind. I just don't hang on to those things. To me, it's like I'm really interested. What's personal to me is that we represent ourselves the best we can on Saturday. That's what I want to do. And, obviously in doing that, I would like for it to be in a winning effort and independent of who we're playing. Or, I didn't realize that it had been since 1955 that we beat Auburn, Alabama. But, those are things that are fun to find out after the game. But, they don't have any part of our, approach or process. So, again, we stay pretty insulated here with, focus on us, a focus on who we are, a focus on the things we need to strengthen in our performance. And that'll be our formula, from here on out.
Everybody awake? Everybody good?
Huh? What just happened?
I know. He's not the most exciting talker. I want to ask, over the course of this...
Don't play the drinking game with Clark Lee. You won't make it to the game Saturday.
Over the course of this 15-game winning streak, do you know how many times South Carolina has played a Vanderbilt team that was above 500 going into that contest?
2.
Do you know what years?
Wait, is that right?
That is right. 2.
Yes, I do. Nope, I don't know. I have no idea.
And take a guess.
Well, let me think. 15 years, so that would be 2002. 7 and 8.
7 and 8?
2000.
No, 15-year winning streak. That goes back to 09.
Oh, just 09. Okay.
Yeah.
09 and 10.
Wes, you got a guess?
I'll go with.
Above 500 or
above 500? Not 500, above 500.
2010, they played 2000. Oh, guys, there's too many years. They opened one of those years with
them
Vandy's.
a couple of times.
That was a very good Vandy team under James Franklin.
Right, but they've only played an above 500 Vandy team twice in that time frame. He says 09 and 10.
I don't know.
2011 and 2018. 2018 was the last time Vanderbilt actually went to a bowl game, so they've never faced a team this good this late in the season like Vanderbilt is this year.
Yeah.
Just
any takeaways?
An interesting nugget for this game.
That is interesting. By the way, Clark Lee is actually, he played at Vandy. He's from Nashville. He has not a Southern accent. Random observation for you.
How much time did he spend at Notre Dame?
Yeah, you don't D-Southern go into Notre Dame for
I guess not.
D-Southern.
2 years or whatever he was there.
He sounds like the perfect Vandy coach.
Yes.
Yeah, just very straightforward, pretty plain.
He enunciates more than...
Yeah.
He enunciates. He's very analytical, but also is a football head.
Yeah.
I see why they hired him. I know it's easy to say that now that they're...
I remember him playing for Vandy. He was a fullback. He was hard-nosed. 2002 to 4, I think he was there. Played at Montgomery Bell Academy in Nashville.
He's got a shaved head, so less time getting haircuts, more time watching film.
I don't have time for haircuts.
They run a little fullback action out there, I think.
They do a lot of things. Watching their formations, I'm like, what is this? They come out in all sorts of different stuff. So there's a lot to look at. But no, he's done. Give him a lot of credit, man. He's done a lot of good things. There have actually been, a few coaches, and not too long ago, that have had good seasons at Vandy. James Franklin obviously is the best example, but Bobby Johnson at Vandy had some really good. They came in here. They beat Steve Spurrier teams twice in a row when Bobby Johnson was there. James Franklin did a good job. Derek Mason did not. But who was the coach in 18? Was it Mason?
Yeah, would have been Mason.
You just said did not.
He didn't. That tenure did not go very well. But point is, there have been some pockets of success for them. It's just when they've been down, they have been
Well,
very down.
and again, if Franklin would have stuck around and didn't take the Penn State job, maybe they could have formed into something after those back-to-back 9-win years. But it's been very hit or miss since then. Again, the last time they went to a bowl game was that 2018 season and the Texas Bowl. And, Clark Lee showed that promise in his first year. They beat Kentucky and Florida at the end of the year. And obviously last year was a dip, but definitely turning in the right direction this year.
To beat a conference opponent 15 straight years, I don't care who they are.
That's tough.
Like that's the fact that and there's been some games in there where Carolina has blown out Vandy, but there's been some games in there where, I mean, who could forget the Zeb Nolan game where he comes in, and the weird thing I remember about that football game, Carolina to start off looked like a much better football team than Vandy. They were like going up and down the field, but I think they had a couple fumbles and just couldn't put them away. And then you look around, you're like, oh man, this thing is close. And then you look around and Vandy has the lead late. So there have been some battles within the span of those 15 years.